Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. If you like my work, please subscribe to the channel, like this video and write a comment. This helps the video to promote and motivates you to try harder every day. If you want to support the channel financially, the link is in the description and in the profile header. Thank you. Enjoy listening. I never thought I'd land a job like this. It wasn't exactly advertised on LinkedIn, nor was it something I'd ever considered applying for. Yet here I was, staring at my laptop screen in a dimly lit room, my hands hovering over the keyboard, about to confirm my new employment contract. The pay was incredible, more than I had ever made before, and the job itself seemed simple. Too simple. All I had to do was watch live streams and moderate the content. That's what the recruiter had told me. The work was mostly curation, ensuring that everything followed the site's guidelines, that the chat remained active and engaged, and that nothing leaked outside of the platform. They didn't tell me what kind of streams these were. Not at first. It all started with an email. A plain text message, no fancy formatting, no logos, no links. Just a few short sentences. We've reviewed your profile. You seem like a good fit. Discretion and detachment are essential. I pay. Work from home. No direct interaction. If interested, respond with yes. It didn't make sense. I wasn't actively job hunting, but I was always looking for extra money. Who wouldn't be? The cost of living was ridiculous, and my current IT gig barely covered rent. I had done some light freelance cybersecurity work before, dabbling in penetration testing, helping people secure their networks. Maybe that's how they found me? But I had never heard of this company. Curiosity got the better of me. I replied, yes. Within minutes, another email arrived. This one had a link, a temporary access code, and a set of instructions. The website was hidden behind layers of encryption, accessible only through a specialized browser. Tor wasn't enough. They had their own proprietary system, one that tunneled through multiple relays, masking its true origin. That should have been my first red flag. But the money. I couldn't ignore the money. After setting up my credentials, I was given access to a test environment. A clean interface, minimalistic, almost sterile. A series of buttons, play, pause, mute, report, delete. I was told I'd be reviewing content. The email said, most streams are performances. Some are real. Do not intervene. Your role is to observe and maintain order. That was the second red flag. But I clicked forward anyway. The first video was tame. A masked figure sitting in a dark room, whispering into a microphone. ASMR? Performance art? I wasn't sure. The chat scrolled rapidly with messages in different languages, cryptic phrases, emotes I didn't recognize. I monitored for a few minutes, then marked it as compliant. Easy money. The second stream was different. A man tied to a chair, his breathing heavy, a hood over his head. The lighting was low, the background blurred. I expected it to cut to something obviously staged, something cinematic. But it didn't. A second figure entered the frame, holding a knife. I froze. The chat exploded with excitement. Bets were being placed. The timer in the corner counted down. I hovered over the report button, but a message popped up, content verified. Do not interfere. I watched. My stomach twisted. I wanted to look away, to shut my laptop, to walk out of the room and pretend I never opened that email. But I didn't. Because after the stream ended, another message appeared on my screen. First shift complete. Payment sent. See you tomorrow. The next night, I logged in again. My heart was pounding as my fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to pretend that the first night had been a fluke, that I had misinterpreted what I saw. Maybe it was an elaborate hoax. Maybe the man in the chair had walked away after the stream ended. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew the truth. A new list of scheduled streams appeared on my dashboard. Each one had a cryptic title and a countdown timer. I swallowed hard and clicked on the first one. The video feed opened immediately. The screen flickered before settling on an image, a woman standing in a dimly lit basement, her hands bound behind her back. Her face was partially obscured by long, dark hair. She wasn't struggling, but I could see her chest rise and fall rapidly. She was terrified. The chat came alive. Anonymous 473, she's a fighter. This should be fun. Dark Omen, 5 minutes till the show starts. Placing bets now. Blood Watcher, knife or fire? Take your guesses. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to look away for a moment. I clicked on the information panel, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The interface was sterile, clinical. The system flagged certain words in chat, but none of them were removed. It was all allowed. Encouraged, even. Then, a new message appeared in the moderator panel. Remember your role. Do not interfere. I exhaled shakily and turned back to the screen. The camera angle shifted. Someone else entered the frame, a tall figure wearing a featureless mask. They held something in their hands. A blade. I felt bile rise in my throat. And yet, I didn't move. The next few minutes were worse than anything I had ever imagined. The woman screamed, struggled. The masked figure took their time. The chat was ecstatic. I forced myself to watch because if I turned away, then I wouldn't know if this was real. And I had to know. When it was over, the screen faded to black. The chat continued, people discussing the performance as if it were a scripted show. I clenched my fists, trying to steady my breathing. Then the next stream started. This one was different. A man was strapped to a table, unconscious. A row of surgical tools was lined up beside him. The masked figure returned, this time accompanied by another person. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, pointing at different tools as if debating which one to use first. The chat was placing bets again. I wanted to close the laptop. Walk away. Never return. But then something unexpected happened. The man on the table woke up. His eyes widened in terror as he realized where he was. He thrashed against the restraints, muffled screams escaping through the gag in his mouth. The masked figures hesitated for a moment. One of them turned toward the camera, tilting their heads slightly as if acknowledging the audience. And then, the screen went dark. I blinked. The chat exploded with complaints. Anonymous 327, what the hell? Did the feed cut out? Dark Omen, this never happens. Who messed up? Blood Watcher, weak. Was just getting good. A notification popped up on my screen. Technical issue detected. Await further instructions. I stared at the message, my heart still racing. I wasn't sure what had happened. A malfunction? A mistake? Or had something interfered? For the first time since I had started this job, I felt something other than dread. I felt curiosity. I wasn't the only one watching. And whoever else was out there, they had just disrupted the system. I needed to find out why. The next night, I logged in earlier than usual. My mind was still reeling from the abrupt cut in the last stream. I had spent hours thinking about it, replaying it in my head. Was it a technical failure, or had someone interfered? The thought that someone had disrupted the process made my stomach twist. A new batch of streams was already scheduled. Their titles were cryptic as always, but the chat was more active than usual. The regulars were buzzing. Anonymous 327, last night was a joke. Who pulled the plug? Dark Omen, glitch in the system? Or something else? Blood Watcher, no way they let that happen again. Tonight should be special. I swallowed hard and clicked on one of the upcoming streams. A countdown timer appeared. 3 minutes until it started. I opened the chat logs, scrolling through previous conversations, trying to understand these people, the ones who watched for entertainment, who placed bets on suffering as if it were a sport. They had their favorites. Some killers had styles that the audience recognized. Some viewers claimed to recognize certain locations, speculating on whether victims were kidnapped from specific areas. Others only cared about the methods used. One name kept appearing, the surgeon. Anonymous 473, surgeon stream confirmed for tonight. Prepare for precision work. Death wisher, scalpel, bone saw, or something new. Watcher X, first incision bets are up. Stomach or throat? Place your wagers. My stomach twisted. They spoke with admiration, excitement. Whoever the surgeon was, they had a reputation. The chat was filled with references to past streams, discussions of techniques, debates over whether this person had medical training. Some users claimed to have seen their work before this site even existed. Then the countdown hit 0. The screen flickered to life. A sterile, white-tiled room. Bright surgical lights overhead. A figure stood at a metal table, meticulously arranging tools. The chat went wild. The camera angle shifted, revealing the victim, a man strapped down, conscious, his eyes darting around in pure panic. He tried to scream, but his mouth was taped shut. The surgeon picked up a scalpel, tilting it slightly in the light before turning to face the camera, as if acknowledging the audience. The chat exploded with excitement. Then something unexpected happened. The surgeon hesitated. It was barely noticeable, a flicker of hesitation, a slight change in posture. But I saw it. The chat didn't seem to notice, or maybe they didn't care. But for the first time, I realized that the killers on these streams weren't just monsters, they were people. People could be afraid. And if they could be afraid, they could be stopped. The surgeon turned back to the victim and made the first incision. The chat roared in approval, but I wasn't watching the procedure anymore. I was watching the surgeon's hands, looking for more signs of hesitation, more evidence that something wasn't right. Then, just as I was about to look away, a private message appeared on my screen. Unknown user, you see it, don't you? I froze. The message had no username attached, no indicator of where it had come from. I stared at the words, my heart hammering in my chest. Unknown user, he doesn't want to be there. And neither do you. I swallowed hard, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had never interacted with anyone directly on this platform before. I didn't even know if I was allowed to. Me, who are you? A long pause. Then another message. Unknown user, someone who made the same mistake you did. Someone who wants out. I exhaled sharply. My fingers trembled as I typed my next question. Me, how? No response. The screen flickered. The stream continued. The surgeon worked methodically. The chat cheered. But I barely saw any of it. My mind was spinning. Someone else had been in my position before. Someone who had tried to leave. And now, they were trying to help me. I didn't sleep that night. After receiving the mysterious message, I stayed glued to my screen, waiting for another response. But nothing came. Whoever had contacted me had vanished just as quickly as they had appeared. Morning light seeped through my blinds, but I barely noticed. My mind raced with questions. If someone else had been in my position before, what had happened to them? Had they escaped? Had they been silenced? And more importantly, why were they reaching out to me? By evening, exhaustion gave way to paranoia. I hesitated before logging back into the platform, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the keyboard. But I knew I had no choice. Avoiding the job wasn't an option, not when I had already accepted the first payment. If I stopped now, they would notice. And I didn't want to find out what happened to people who quit. The dashboard loaded, the usual list of scheduled streams appearing in front of me. But something was different. A new message. It wasn't from the unknown user. This one came from admin. Admin, we appreciate your dedication. Expect a direct assignment soon. I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. Direct assignment? What did that mean? Up until now, I had only been an observer, a passive moderator. But now it sounded like they wanted me to be something more. Before I could process it further, a new stream notification appeared. Urgent review requested. I clicked on it, and my screen filled with static before resolving into an image. A dark, windowless room. A single chair at the center. Someone was sitting in it, bound and blindfolded. But this time, something was wrong. The person in the chair wasn't a random victim. It was me. Or at least, it looked like me. Same hair, same build. Even the clothes were eerily similar to what I was wearing at that moment. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched the screen, my own face obscured by a hood. The chat immediately reacted. Anonymous 327, holy shit. A moderator gets a turn? This is new. Dark Omen, is this a warning or a test? Watcher X, maybe he's not pulling his weight. Maybe he asked too many questions. My mouth went dry. Was this some kind of sick joke? A deep fake? A pre-recorded video designed to mess with me? Or was this their way of telling me they knew? Then, the camera shifted and a new figure stepped into view. Unlike the masked figures I had seen before, this one wasn't hiding. A man, middle-aged, clean-shaven, wearing a simple black suit. He stared directly into the camera, his expression unreadable. And then he spoke. You should know by now that we watch the Watchers. I felt ice crawl up my spine. Do your job, and you will be rewarded. Stray from your path, and he gestured toward the bound figure. Well, you understand, don't you? The screen went black. The chat exploded into speculation. I could barely breathe. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know what to type. I didn't even know if I should respond. Then, a new message appeared in my private inbox. Admin, consider this motivation. Your direct assignment will arrive soon. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. They were watching me. Testing me. Seeing if I would run, if I would react. But I wasn't going to give them what they wanted. I needed to find a way out. And I needed to do it before I really ended up in that chair. I barely had time to process what had happened before my next notification arrived. Admin, your direct assignment has been uploaded. Failure is not an option. A new file appeared in my dashboard, a locked briefing labeled Moderator Task Priority Alpha. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the mouse. This was it. The moment where my job shifted from passive observer to something much worse. I had no idea what they were about to ask of me, but I knew one thing, I couldn't refuse. I clicked the file. A video started playing. The same suited man from the previous stream stared into the camera, sitting in a dimly lit office. A single desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his face. You've proven yourself capable of following instructions. That's why you've been chosen for this assignment. He leaned forward slightly, his expression cold. Tonight, you will make a choice. The camera angle shifted, revealing two grainy images side by side. Two people. A man and a woman. Both bound, both gagged, both terrified. Bile rose in my throat as I read the instructions below the images. You will determine who lives and who dies. I sucked in a sharp breath. The chat was already lighting up as viewers anticipated my response. My screen was filled with usernames, bets being placed, and twisted justifications for why one should be chosen over the other. I scanned the details beneath each image. The man was in his late 40s, his name redacted, but the notes mentioned previous legal issues. The woman was younger, early 20s, with no criminal record. They were giving me reasons. Trying to make this decision logical. But there was nothing logical about this. A countdown timer appeared at the bottom of the screen. 5 minutes. I clenched my jaw. I couldn't just refuse. They had made it clear what happened to people who disobeyed. And yet, if I chose, I was no better than the monsters in the chat, the ones who watched for entertainment, the ones who placed bets on lives like it was a game. My hands shook as I hovered over the selection panel. My mind raced. Was there a way out of this? A way to stall? To trick the system? Then, another message popped up in my private inbox. Unknown user, don't choose. I can help. Trust me. My heart nearly stopped. It was them again. The one who had reached out before. But how? How could they help me? For minutes, my breathing was ragged. I typed a quick response. Me, how? What do I do? A pause. Then, unknown user, leave the choice blank. Let the timer run out. I froze. That didn't make sense. Wouldn't that be considered refusal? Wouldn't that put me in danger? 3 minutes. The chat was growing restless. People were taunting me, mocking my hesitation. Anonymous 327, moderator having a moral crisis? How cute. Dark Omen, TikTok, newbie. Pick or be picked. Bloodwatcher, cowards don't last long here. My pulse pounded in my ears. I didn't know if I could trust this unknown user. But I knew one thing, choosing meant becoming complicit. It meant crossing a line I couldn't uncross. 2 minutes. I let go of the mouse. My hands balled into fists. I wasn't going to choose. I waited. The tension in the chat was thick, anticipation turning into irritation. 1 minute. The suited man on the screen didn't move. He simply watched, as if daring me to make a move. Then, midnight. The screen went black. A system error message flashed and read, moderator failed to comply. Awaiting administrator override. I held my breath. I had no idea what was coming next. Then, a final message from the unknown user. Stay offline. They will come looking for you. The screen shut off completely. And I realized, with cold, creeping dread, that this wasn't just a job anymore. This was a trap. And I was already in too deep. I shut my laptop, my hands still shaking. The words from the unknown user echoed in my mind, stay offline. They will come looking for you. For a moment, I considered ignoring the warning. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe I had already overestimated how much they cared. But deep down, I knew the truth. The moment I refused to choose, I became a liability. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think logically. If they were really coming, how long did I have? Hours? Minutes? I needed to get out of my apartment. Now. I grabbed my phone and wallet, stuffing them into my jacket. The floor creaked beneath me as I moved, every noise amplified by my heightened senses. I hesitated by the door, my fingers hovering over the knob. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. No caller ID. Too late. My breath hitched. A shadow moved outside my window. A car engine rumbled on the street below, idling. They were here. I barely had time to think. I turned and bolted toward the back door. My heart pounded as I fumbled with the lock, throwing it open just as I heard footsteps pounding up the stairs to my apartment. I ran. The alley behind my building was dark, the streetlights barely cutting through the night. My breaths came fast and shallow as I sprinted toward the main road. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to put as much distance between myself and that apartment as possible. A black SUV turned the corner ahead, its headlights sweeping across the pavement. I ducked into a side street, my pulse hammering in my ears. If they had found my home this quickly, they had been watching me for longer than I realized. The game had changed. I needed help. My mind raced through my options. The police? No, I couldn't prove any of this without exposing my own involvement. Friends? I had deliberately kept my life isolated. There was no one I could trust. Except, I pulled out my phone, hesitating for only a second before typing a response. Me, Where do I go? The unknown user replied almost instantly. Unknown user, train station. Eastbound. Now. I didn't question it. I took off toward the nearest subway entrance, slipping through the turnstiles just as I heard tires screeching in the distance. The platform was nearly empty. A homeless man slept on a bench. An older woman clutched her purse tightly, eyeing me suspiciously. I paced near the edge of the tracks, every nerve in my body screaming for me to stay alert. Then, the train arrived. As I stepped inside, I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark coat stepping onto the platform. He wasn't running. He wasn't searching. He was watching. The doors slid shut between us. I didn't relax. Not yet. I found an empty seat near the back of the car, keeping my head low as the train rumbled forward. My hands tightened around my phone. I'm on the train. What now? Unknown user, get off at Kingston. Second exit. Someone will be waiting. I swallowed hard. This was insane. I was blindly following the instructions of a faceless entity on the dark web. But I didn't have another choice. Minutes stretched into eternity as the train sped through the underground tunnels. Every time the doors opened at a new stop, I held my breath, expecting armed men to flood in. But they never did. Then, Kingston Station. I stepped off, my eyes scanning the dimly lit platform. The few passengers quickly dispersed, leaving me alone. The second exit was at the far end. I moved cautiously, my pulse hammering. Then, a voice behind me. You're late. I spun around. A woman stood in the shadows, her hood pulled low over her face. I couldn't see much, but her stance was firm, confident. She wasn't afraid. Come with me if you want to live. I hesitated for only a second. Then, I followed her into the night. The woman led me through a maze of side streets and alleyways, never once looking back. I struggled to keep up, my pulse pounding from adrenaline and exhaustion. My mind screamed at me not to trust her, but who else did I have? After several blocks, she stopped in front of an old, rusted door tucked between two abandoned buildings. She knocked 3 times, then twice more in quick succession. A metallic click echoed in the silence, and the door creaked open. Inside, dim fluorescent lights flickered above a narrow stairwell. She stepped through without hesitation, and after a brief moment of doubt, I followed. The basement smelled of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. The walls were lined with shelves filled with outdated computer monitors, tangled cables, and piles of old hard drives. A single desk sat in the middle of the room, covered in multiple screens displaying live feeds of security cameras, darknet forums, and encrypted chat logs. She pulled back her hood, revealing sharp features and piercing green eyes. Her dark hair was tied back in a low ponytail, and she had the look of someone who had seen too much and trusted too little. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, do you? I swallowed hard. I didn't exactly volunteer for this. She scoffed. None of us did. I stiffened. Us? Before she could answer, a man emerged from the shadows, arms crossed over his chest. He was older, maybe late 40s, with graying stubble and tired eyes. He wore a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but something about him screamed military. You almost got yourself killed tonight, he said, his voice low and gruff. I clenched my fists. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. I shot back. Yeah? And what would you have done? He studied me for a moment, then let out a sigh. Exactly what you did. The woman leaned against the desk, arms folded. They won't stop looking for you. You know that, right? I nodded. I figured. The man exchanged a glance with her before speaking. Then you better start listening. Because if we don't get ahead of them, you won't last the week. They introduced themselves, at least, by the names they were willing to share. The woman went by Sarah. The man called himself Grayson. We've been watching the network for years, Sarah explained, sifting through data on one of the monitors. tracking patterns, breaking into hidden nodes, trying to map out their infrastructure. I frowned. Who are they? Grayson exhaled sharply. No one knows exactly. The people running the streams, the ones making decisions? Ghosts. Faceless. But the moderators, the enforcers, they're very real. And very dangerous. I thought about the suited man from the stream, the way he had spoken like he was delivering a sermon. They called it a direct assignment. Sarah's fingers froze on the keyboard. They tested you? I nodded slowly. They wanted me to choose who lived and who died. She cursed under her breath. Grayson's expression darkened. And you didn't choose. It wasn't a question. No. He let out a breath. Then they're going to escalate. I tensed. What do you mean? Sarah turned one of the monitors toward me. It displayed a list of names. Some were crossed out. Others had red marks next to them. Every moderator who refused to participate disappeared within days. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. So what happens now? Grayson leaned forward. Now, we fight back. The weight of Grayson's words settled over me like a thick fog. Fight back? Against an organization that had eyes everywhere? That could track me in ways I didn't even understand? It seemed impossible. And yet, I knew the alternative was worse. Ow! I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah and Grayson exchanged a glance. It was Sarah who spoke first. We start by getting you off their radar. She typed something into her console, and the screens flickered, displaying lines of scrolling code. Right now, they're tracking you through multiple channels, your devices, your digital footprint, maybe even physical surveillance. If we don't cut you loose from their systems, they'll find you. Grayson leaned against the desk, arms crossed. We have a window, maybe 24 hours before they start moving aggressively. Less, if they already have someone nearby. A cold chill ran through me. So what do we do? Sarah gestured to a chair. Sit. We're going to erase you. For the next 3 hours, I sat motionless as Sarah worked, explaining bits and pieces as she moved through my files, deleting, corrupting, and rerouting data. She wiped my phone, rerouted my IP through multiple proxies, and removed any trace of my activity from standard online services. Every now and then, she muttered under her breath, frustrated by the complexity of the tracking methods in place. These guys don't just watch, she said at one point, shaking her head. They embed themselves in everything you do. Every click, every movement, every keystroke, it's all logged somewhere. Whoever's behind this isn't just running an operation. They're running an entire ecosystem. Grayson had been quiet for most of the process, but when Sarah paused, he spoke up. Tell him the rest. Sarah sighed and turned to face me. We can make you disappear digitally, but it won't stop them from coming after you physically. If they want you bad enough, they'll send someone. I swallowed hard. An enforcer? Grayson nodded. Or worse. I wanted to ask what could be worse, but something in his expression told me I didn't want to know. By the time Sarah was satisfied, my head was spinning. I had no online presence left, no access to anything I once relied on. My bank accounts were gone. My email erased. Even my old messages had been scrambled and deleted. Congratulations, she said flatly. You no longer exist. I exhaled slowly, trying to process it all. So now what? Grayson pushed a folder across the desk toward me. Inside was a set of forged identification documents, cash, and a cheap burner phone. You take this and you run. I frowned. Run where? Sarah tapped a flashing icon on her monitor. We intercepted a message from the network. They're planning something big, bigger than anything we've seen before. If we can get inside, we might have a chance to expose them. I felt a pit form in my stomach. You want me to go back in? Not as a moderator, Grayson said. As a ghost. Someone who shouldn't exist. I looked between them, my mind screaming at me to say no. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had already crossed the line. There was no going back now. The weight of the burner phone in my pocket felt heavier than it should have. I was now a ghost, someone who didn't exist, at least not on paper. But the truth was, I had never felt more real, more present, more exposed. Grayson and Sarah had given me an option: run and disappear forever, or go deeper into the network and fight back. The rational part of me screamed to take the first option, to cut my losses and vanish before they sent someone to finish the job. But I knew myself. I had to see this through. Sarah typed something into her terminal, pulling up a series of encrypted chat logs. "They're planning something big," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Bigger than any of their past operations." Grayson stood behind her, arms crossed. "We need to get inside, and you're the only one who can do it." I scoffed. "Why me?" Sarah turned to me, eyes sharp. "Because they already mark you. You're not just another spectator. They tested you, and you refused to play. That makes you an anomaly. If you can re-enter the system under a different identity, you might find out what they're planning before it's too late." I hesitated, feeling the walls close in around me. "And if they realize it's me?" Grayson's expression was unreadable. "Then we make sure they don't." The plan was reckless, but it was the only one we had. Sarah spent the next few hours building a completely new digital identity for me. A fresh alias, fake credentials, a backstory that would pass the initial screening. The goal was to infiltrate their recruitment channels, find out where they were operating from, and gather any intel that could expose them. "They don't recruit just anyone," Sarah warned as she worked. "They test their applicants. And if they suspect you of lying, they'll make you disappear." I nodded, absorbing every word. "What kind of tests?" She hesitated before answering. "Psychological. Ethical. They push you until you break. And if you don't break, they make you prove you belong." I didn't ask what that meant. I already had an idea. The first step was getting their attention. Sarah had set up a secure machine, completely isolated from any of my previous activity. The moment I logged into the dark web with my new identity, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching. The recruitment forums weren't easy to access, but with Sarah's guidance, I found a thread marked only by a symbol, a black handprint against a blood-red background. The message was simple. "We are watching. Prove yourself." A set of coordinates followed. Grayson leaned over my shoulder, studying the screen. "They want you to show up in person." I felt my pulse quicken. "That's a trap." Sarah nodded. "Probably. But it's also the only way in." The coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Grayson insisted on staking out the area before I went in, scanning for hidden surveillance or signs of an ambush. "If anything feels off, you leave." "Understood?" I swallowed hard. Understood. The warehouse was eerily silent when I stepped inside. The air smelled of rust and decay, the only light coming from a few flickering bulbs along the ceiling. A single metal chair sat in the center of the room. And then the door slammed shut behind me. A voice echoed from the shadows. "Sit." I didn't move. A figure emerged, tall, dressed in black, face obscured by a mask. He held a small device in his hand. "You came here to prove yourself. Do it now, or leave in pieces." The door was locked. I had no choice but to play along. I sat. Another figure stepped forward, placing a laptop in front of me. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy video feed. Someone was tied to a chair. Their head was covered with a bag, their breathing ragged. The masked man tilted his head. "Choose." My stomach dropped. "What?" He pressed a button. The feed changed. A different hostage, this time a woman, sobbing against her restraints. "One lives. One dies. Choose." My hands clenched into fists. Not again. I looked around, searching for a way out, for any sign of weakness. But the masked figures stood like statues, waiting. I could feel my pulse in my throat. This was the test. They wanted to see if I had what it took. The cursor hovered over 2 buttons, execute or spare. I took a slow breath, and I made my choice. The glow of the computer screen was the only light illuminating Alex's small apartment as he scrolled absent-mindedly through YouTube. It was past midnight, the city outside his window long since fallen silent, yet his mind remained restless. Alex had always been fascinated by the forgotten corners of the internet, the eerie, the unexplained, the cryptic. But tonight, his aimless browsing had led him somewhere he had never thought to explore before, the very first video ever uploaded to YouTube. Me at the Zoo. The title was simple, almost underwhelming. The video itself was even more so, just a young man standing in front of an elephant enclosure, speaking casually to the camera about how cool the animals were. There was nothing particularly remarkable about it. No strange edits, no mysterious figures lurking in the background. It was just a piece of internet history. And yet, something about it unsettled him. Alex had seen the video before, of course. Everyone had. It was a well-known fact that YouTube co-founder Jawed Karim had uploaded on April 23, 2005. It was the internet equivalent of an artifact, preserved, studied, but ultimately mundane. So why did it feel off? A quick glance at the comments showed nothing unusual at first. Typical remarks about internet nostalgia, jokes about how far YouTube had come. But as he scrolled further, he noticed something strange. A thread buried deep within the comments, full of cryptic messages. This is not the original video. Has anyone seen the uncut version? They keep erasing our comments. Keep searching. His curiosity piqued, Alex clicked on one of the usernames, hoping to find more posts by them. But when he tried to follow the link, an error message appeared. This account no longer exists. Odd. He tried another. The same result. It was as if every user who had participated in that thread had vanished. Feeling a familiar rush of adrenaline, Alex copied the video's URL and ran it through an old metadata extractor he had used in past internet sleuthing. The tool pulled up the usual information, upload date, resolution, runtime, but then something caught his eye. There were additional frames logged. Frames that did not appear in the publicly available version. He tried refreshing the page, thinking it might be an error, but the data remained unchanged. According to the metadata, the original runtime was supposed to be 13 seconds longer. 13 seconds. His hands moved almost on their own as he opened an archived version of YouTube, digging through old snapshots of the site from 2005. If the video had ever existed in another form, maybe some fragment of it remained buried in internet history. What he found sent a chill down his spine. An old discussion forum from 2005 contained a post titled, "Me at the Zoo, full version?" The thread was brief, with only a few responses, but one stood out. I saw it before it was taken down. The last few seconds, he stops talking. Just stares past the camera. The elephants are gone. The screen glitches, like something's trying to come through. The user who posted it? Deleted. The account? Wiped. Alex leaned back in his chair, staring at the video on his screen. His heart pounded in his chest. He hit replay, this time watching more closely, searching the shadows, the pixels, the subtle distortions. Had something been removed from this video? Something no one was supposed to see? Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was being deliberately erased, covered up. The idea sounded absurd at first. Why would anyone care about an old YouTube video? But the inconsistencies, the missing accounts, and the metadata all pointed to something lurking just beneath the surface. Determined to uncover whatever was hidden in those lost 13 seconds, Alex decided to analyze the video frame by frame. He downloaded the highest quality version available and ran it through a video editing software, slowing it down, inspecting each frame with meticulous care. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just Jawed standing there, talking casually about elephants. Then he saw it. At precisely the 8-second mark, in the background, something flickered, a brief distortion, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. He rewound and played it again, advancing frame by frame. There. A shadowy figure, standing far behind Jod. It was indistinct, almost as if it weren't really there, just an anomaly in the compression. But the more Alex stared, the more certain he became something, was watching. His pulse quickened. Was this the reason people were claiming the original video had been altered? Had YouTube edited out something it didn't want the world to see? Curious, he extracted the video's audio track and ran it through a spectrogram, a tool that visualizes sound frequencies. Most of it appeared normal, displaying Jod's voice and background noise. But as the video neared its end, he noticed something strange, a series of faint, irregular peaks, too structured to be mere static. It almost looked like a pattern. He boosted the audio, filtering out background noise, and then listened closely. A whisper. At first, it was too faint to understand, just a breath against the silence. But after isolating the frequency, he heard it clearly. They're still here. A chill ran down his spine. He played it again, making sure he wasn't imagining things. They're still here. The words were distorted, almost mechanical, as if they had been buried beneath the audio track, never meant to be heard. His fingers trembled as he typed the phrase into a search engine, hoping to find anything that might connect it to the video. The results were sparse, mostly old conspiracy forum posts that had long since been abandoned. One caught his eye, a thread titled "The First Video, Who Else Hears It?" dated back to 2006. The original poster described exactly what Alex had just discovered, a whisper embedded in the audio, a shadow in the background. One of the responses stood out. If you heard it, it's already too late. The user who had posted it. Deleted. Alex sat back in his chair, his mind racing. This wasn't just a glitch or a compression artifact. Something, had left a message hidden in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. And now he had heard it. His phone buzzed, startling him. He glanced at the screen. A notification from an unknown number. Stop looking. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes darted around his apartment, paranoia creeping in. Was this a prank? A coincidence? Or had his search triggered something he wasn't supposed to find? For the first time, Alex hesitated. He had always loved chasing mysteries, uncovering lost stories buried in the depths of the internet. But this felt different. This felt personal. And then, just as he was about to shut his laptop, the video refreshed on its own. The title had changed. Me at the Zoo, Uncut. And the runtime had increased by 13 seconds. Alex's heart pounded as he stared at the screen. The title had changed. The runtime had increased. None of it should have been possible. His hands trembled as he clicked play. The video began just as before, Jawed Kareem standing in front of the elephant enclosure, his voice casual, almost mundane. But something was different. The colors seemed duller, the background eerily silent, as if the usual ambient sounds had been stripped away. The video progressed normally until it reached the original 19-second mark. Then, the uncut footage began. Jawed suddenly stopped speaking. His expression changed, not dramatically, but subtly, as if he had just noticed something unsettling behind the camera. He glanced to his right, then over his shoulder, his posture growing stiff. The camera trembled slightly, as if the person filming had adjusted their grip. The elephants in the background weren't moving anymore. They stood perfectly still, frozen mid-step. Even the air seemed unnaturally still, as if the entire world had paused. Then, the distortion started. A low hum filled Alex's speakers, a frequency so deep it made his teeth ache. The screen flickered, the colors warping into unnatural shades of green and red. For a split second, a frame flashed. Jawed was no longer in front of the elephant enclosure. He was standing in complete darkness, his face barely visible. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Another frame flickered. This time, it was the zoo again, but the enclosure was empty. No elephants. No visitors. Just a single shadow standing where Jod had been, its features indistinct, its presence unnatural. The screen went black. Then, one last frame appeared. It was a close-up of Jod's face, his eyes wide with something that could only be described as terror. His mouth was slightly open, frozen mid-sentence. The timestamp in the corner showed April 23, 2005, but the video file had updated just moments ago. The video ended abruptly, returning to the normal YouTube interface. But the view count had reset to 0. Alex's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He tried to reload the page, but the video was gone. The URL led to an error message: "This video does not exist." A cold dread settled in his chest. Someone, or something, had uploaded a new version of the video for him to see, and then erased it before anyone else could. He needed answers. Determined, Alex turned his attention to Jod Karim himself. If anyone could explain this, it was the man who had uploaded the original video. But finding information about him was surprisingly difficult. Unlike other YouTube co-founders, Jod had largely avoided the spotlight. There were few interviews, no recent social media activity. The last known public appearance he had made was years ago. He checked LinkedIn. Nothing. Twitter. No updates in years. Facebook. An abandoned profile. Then, an old forum post caught his eye, an obscure technology discussion board from 2006. The thread was titled, "Where's Jod Karim?" The original post speculated that after YouTube's success, Jod had distanced himself from the platform. But one reply stood out. Jod never distanced himself. He disappeared. The account that had posted it was deleted. Alex's stomach churned. He opened another tab and searched deeper. Eventually, he found an archived article from 2005 discussing YouTube's launch. It featured a blurry photo of Jod with 2 other co-founders at an early event. But the caption beneath the image made his blood run cold. Pictured left to right, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and an unidentified guest. Unidentified? That didn't make sense. Jod Karim was one of the co-founders. Why wasn't he named? Frantically, Alex searched for more images of the original YouTube team. But every official photo he found featured only Chad and Steve. Jod was absent, as if he had been erased from history. He scrolled back to the blurry photo. Zooming in, he focused on the unidentified guest. The image was too grainy to make out details, but something was off about the figure's face. It looked blurred, like an out-of-focus shadow. As if Jod Karim had never been there at all. Alex's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. He was never meant to be found. Alex stared at his phone screen, his fingers cold and unmoving. He was never meant to be found. The message was clear, yet impossibly cryptic. Who had sent it? And how did they know what he was searching for? He glanced around his dimly lit apartment, half expecting to see a shadow lurking in the corner. The only thing staring back at him was the silent glow of his monitor, still frozen on the blurred image of Jod, or whatever was left of him. He needed to dig deeper. Determined, he turned back to his computer and searched for any records of deleted or altered versions of Me at the Zoo. If the uncut footage truly existed, someone must have archived it somewhere. The Wayback Machine had captured old snapshots of YouTube, but frustratingly, most early video files were missing. Then, he stumbled upon an old discussion on a forgotten image board. Thread title, Me at the Zoo, have you seen the final frames? The original poster claimed to have found a version of the video that was different from the widely available one. They described a set of hidden frames at the very end, frames that were supposedly cut from the original upload. One reply stood out. Don't look at them. They are not for us. The thread had been archived, the original poster's account long since deleted. But one user had linked to a now-dead website that had allegedly hosted the uncut version. Alex copied the URL and ran it through an internet archive service. To his surprise, a snapshot of the site existed from 2005. It contained a single downloadable file, zoo_full.avi. The file was broken, corrupted beyond repair. but Alex knew there were ways to extract partial data from damaged files. He ran it through forensic recovery software, hoping to pull anything usable from the wreckage. Slowly, fragmented images began to emerge. The first few frames were normal, the familiar sight of Jod standing at the zoo, speaking to the camera. But as the extracted images continued, something changed. Frame 19, Jod is mid-sentence, but his eyes are slightly off focus, as if he's looking past the camera at something unseen. Frame 24, the elephants in the background are no longer in the same position. They haven't moved, they have shifted, unnaturally, as if reality itself had glitched. Frame 32, the camera is trembling, but Jod is frozen in place. His mouth is open, yet there is no sound. Frame 41, a distortion in the background. A shape, barely perceptible, standing behind the fence. Frame 56, the entire image is corrupted except for Jod's face. His expression is now one of sheer horror. Frame 62, the final frame. Jod is gone. The zoo is empty. The camera is tilted downward, as if whoever was filming had dropped it. The only thing visible is a shadow stretching across the dirt, a long, unnatural silhouette that does not belong to any human. Alex's stomach twisted. This wasn't just an eerie anomaly. Someone had removed these frames for a reason. A new email notification popped up on his screen. From unknown@nullserver.net subject, "You've seen too much, body, delete everything." Alex's breath caught in his throat. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Was this a threat? A warning? Or something worse? Before he could react, his computer screen flickered. The recovery software crashed. The extracted frames vanished from his hard drive as if they had never been there at all. And then, his speakers emitted a single, garbled whisper. "They're still here." Alex's heart pounded as he stared at the empty folder on his desktop. The recovered frames, gone. His hands trembled as he tried to reopen the forensic recovery tool, but the application refused to launch. It was as if his computer had purged the data on its own, or something had erased it remotely. His inbox still displayed the ominous email, "Delete everything." He hesitated, then moved the message to a separate folder. He wouldn't delete anything. Not yet. Instead, he went back to the forum where he had first seen the mention of the forbidden frames. He had to find someone who knew more. But the thread was gone. Not just locked or archived, completely erased. His stomach twisted. He refreshed the page, hoping it was a glitch, but the forum now displayed a generic error message, "Thread not found." Every post discussing the uncut version of me at the zoo had vanished, as if the entire internet had decided to forget about it. But Alex wasn't ready to let it go. He turned to a last resort, private message logs. Some forums stored copies of messages even if the original thread was deleted. If he had interacted with anyone in the discussion, there might still be a trace. A single result appeared. A message from an unknown user, sent 2 days ago. The sender's username was just a string of numbers and letters, XA09321. The subject line read, "You're looking in the right place." Alex clicked on it, his pulse quickening. If you're reading this, the thread is already gone. They always delete them. I don't know how long this message will last, but I need to warn you, do not search for the uploader. Jod was never meant to be the first. If you've seen the final frames, it's already watching you. Do not reply. Do not ask questions. Just forget what you saw. Alex exhaled sharply, his mind racing. He tried clicking on the sender's profile. Account deleted. Frustrated, he copied the username and searched for any mention of it across the internet. Most results were meaningless, but then, a Reddit post. It was from an old conspiracy subreddit, buried under years of forgotten content. The post title read, XA09321, the silent account. The original post claimed that this user had been active across multiple forums for over a decade, always appearing in discussions about unexplained internet anomalies. They would leave cryptic warnings, hinting at hidden content and deleted files, then vanish without a trace. But one reply stood out, written by someone who had once interacted with XA09321 directly. They don't just warn you. They know things. Things no one else should. I asked them once how they knew about deleted content. They told me, because I was there when it was removed. Alex felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Was XA09321 someone on the inside? A former YouTube moderator? A whistleblower? Or were they something else entirely? His hands were shaking, but he knew he had to keep going. He switched tactics and searched for archived versions of me at the zoo on lesser-known internet storage sites. He found an old torrent file claiming to be a raw backup of YouTube's earliest uploads. It had only one seed. He hesitated. If what XA09321 had said was true, then continuing down this path meant risking more than just lost files. But he had already come too far. Alex clicked download. The download progress inched forward at an agonizing pace. Alex's screen flickered occasionally, but he told himself it was just his paranoia. The torrent file claimed to be an unaltered backup of YouTube's earliest uploads, but he knew better than to trust that at face value. Whatever was hidden in me at the zoo, it had been deliberately erased, and now he was bringing it back. A notification popped up, download complete. Alex exhaled and opened the folder. Inside, dozens of video files were arranged by upload date, each labeled with a cryptic string of numbers. He sorted them chronologically, scrolling down to the earliest one. 2005-04-23-methazu.avi. His heart pounded. He double-clicked the file. The video started normally. Jod stood before the elephant enclosure, his voice clear but grainy. The footage looked identical to the public version at first. But as the seconds ticked by, Alex noticed subtle differences, the way Jod's eyes darted toward the left of the frame, the faint tremor in his voice that hadn't been in the version he had seen before. Then, at the 19-second mark, the screen glitched. Jod's face distorted, his features stretching unnaturally before snapping back. The elephants behind him stopped moving entirely. The audio warped into a low, pulsing hum, rhythmic like breathing. A single frame flickered, a frame that had been removed from the official upload. Alex paused the video and scrubbed backward frame by frame. There. A shadowy figure stood just behind the fence, barely visible in the dim light. It wasn't part of the original crowd. It wasn't even looking at the camera. It was staring directly at Jod. Alex swallowed hard and advanced another frame. The figure's head twitched slightly, an unnatural jerk that no human could make. Its face was obscured, but its outline was wrong, too tall, too thin, as if it had been stretched beyond normal proportions. He checked the timestamp in the corner of the frame. 4 hours 23 minutes and 5 seconds, 13 hours 46 minutes and 9 seconds. That didn't make sense. The video was recorded in 2005. But the timestamp suggested a different time, 1:46 p.m. He cross-referenced it with an old Wither archive. On April 23, 2005, the San Diego Zoo had been sunny at that time. But in the frame he was staring at, the sky was overcast, gray and lifeless. He played the video again. At 24 seconds, the audio cut out completely. At 26 seconds, the camera shook violently, though Jod remained still. At 31 seconds, a whisper crackled through the speakers. A single word, barely audible, stretched unnaturally long. Leave. The video cut to black. A new file appeared in the folder. Alex's stomach turned. He hadn't downloaded anything else. But there it was. donutwatch.mp4. His hands trembled as he moved the cursor over the file. It hadn't been there before. Someone, or something, had placed it in the archive. He clicked it. The screen remained black, but the audio played first, a distorted voice, layered and overlapping, whispering in a language he didn't recognize. The whispers grew faster, more frantic, until suddenly an image appeared. It wasn't the zoo. It was his apartment. His chair. His desk. His monitor, showing the exact screen he was looking at right now. And behind him, a shape. Alex spun around, heart hammering. The room was empty. He turned back to the screen. The video had stopped. The file was gone. A new email notification blinked at the corner of his screen. From unknown@nullserver.net subject. Last warning, body, you should have deleted everything. The lights flickered. And then, his screen turned black. The whisper returned. But this time, it was inside the room. Alex's apartment was plunged into an unnatural silence. The only sound was his own ragged breathing. His screen remained black, an abyss reflecting his own haunted face. He reached for his phone, hands trembling, but before he could dial anyone, his speakers crackled to life again. A whisper. This time, it was closer. He turned, eyes darting to the corners of the room. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched was suffocating. He forced himself to take a slow, steadying breath. He had to stay rational. He had to. His monitor flickered back on. The email was gone. His desktop was empty, as if everything had been wiped clean. No files. No folders. Nothing. Alex clenched his jaw. He refused to believe he had imagined it all. Someone, or something, was trying to bury this. He wasn't going to let them. He reached under his desk, pulled out an external hard drive, and plugged it in. If they wanted to erase everything, he would make sure there was always another copy. He opened his browser, determined to retrace his steps, to find another trace of the forbidden frames of don'twatch.mp4 of XA09321. But as soon as he clicked on the search bar, his entire screen filled with a single message. Stop. A chill ran down his spine. It wasn't a browser notification. It wasn't from his operating system. It was just there. A message in plain, bold text against a black background. His mouse was frozen. His keyboard was unresponsive. Then, the message changed. You are being watched. Alex shoved his chair back, heart hammering. He grabbed his phone and snapped a picture of the screen, evidence, proof that he wasn't going insane. But the moment he lowered the phone, the screen changed again. Look behind you. The breath caught in his throat. He didn't want to. But something in the air shifted, something cold, something wrong. Slowly, he turned. Nothing. The room was empty. But the shadows in the farthest corner seemed deeper than they should be. They felt alive. He stepped forward, just slightly, peering into the darkness. His phone vibrated violently in his hand. He looked down. An unknown number. He answered without thinking. Hello? At first, there was only static. Then, a voice. Layered, like 100 whispers speaking at once. You shouldn't have watched. The call ended. The screen went black again. His own reflection stared back at him. But there was something else. Something just behind him. A silhouette. Tall. Watching. Alex spun around. The room was empty. But the whisper remained. I never thought I'd end up working in the sewers. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a firefighter, one of those heroes who saved people from burning buildings and climbed up ladders into smoke-filled windows. Life had different plans for me. The job posting was simple: Search and Rescue Officer, Urban Infrastructure Division. The pay was decent, the benefits solid. It wasn't until after my first week on the job that I realized the real reason why they needed people. Our team operates deep below the city, in a vast, labyrinthine sewer system that most people never think about. It's not just tunnels of running water. There are maintenance rooms, service corridors, and abandoned sections that date back to the city's earliest days. Some parts are so old, they don't even appear on modern maps. Those are the places we avoid. On my first day, my supervisor, a gruff but fair man named Cooper, handed me a laminated sheet of paper. Read these. Memorize them. Don't question them. I looked at the list. It wasn't what I expected. Rules for urban rescue officers. If you hear a voice calling for help, verify the source before approaching. If the voice repeats the exact same phrase more than twice, leave immediately. Never look directly into the water for too long. If you see something looking back, report it to command and exit the area. If your radio starts picking up static, turn around and retrace your steps. Do not try to communicate. If you find a door that isn't on your map, do not open it. Mark it and move on. Never, under any circumstances, follow someone who isn't wearing an official uniform, even if they look like your partner. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Walk faster. If you get lost, stay put. Do not try to navigate by memory. We will find you. I laughed nervously. This is a joke, right? Cooper's face remained stone cold. No, kid. These are the rules that keep you alive. I wanted to argue, to tell him this sounded like some ridiculous initiation prank, but something in his expression stopped me. The other officers around me weren't laughing either. One of them, an older guy named Martinez, just shook his head and muttered, "Wish I'd taken this job less seriously at first. Would have slept better before I learned the truth." That first night, I went home with the list still in my pocket, reading it over again and again. It didn't make sense, but it unsettled me in a way I couldn't shake. What the hell was down there that required rules like these? My first call came a week later. A missing person, last seen near a maintenance hatch behind an old subway station. Routine, they told me. Just a lost vagrant, most likely. Cooper and I suited up, checked our gear, and descended into the tunnels. The smell hit first, a thick, cloying mix of damp rot and industrial waste. I pulled my mask tighter, trying not to gag. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. The only sounds were our boots sloshing through the shallow water and the occasional drip of condensation from above. We followed the path to where the man was last seen. A flashlight had been left behind, its beam still flickering against the slick wall. No sign of the man. Then I heard it. "Help me." A faint voice, coming from somewhere up ahead. I stepped forward, but Cooper grabbed my arm. "Hold up," he whispered. "Listen." The voice called again. Same words. Same tone. No variation. "Help me." Then again. Exactly the same. The hair on my arm stood up. Cooper exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "We're leaving." I wanted to argue, we had a job to do, but something about the way he turned on his heel, the urgency in his steps, made me follow without question. We retraced our route quickly, not speaking until we were back at the access ladder. Only then did Cooper relax. "What the hell was that?" I demanded. He looked at me, his face grim. "You ever hear a recording loop? How it repeats exactly the same every time?" I nodded. That wasn't a man calling for help. He paused. And whatever it was, it knew we were listening. That night, I barely slept. I dreamed of voices in the dark, of eyes watching from the water. And when I woke up, the rules were still fresh in my mind. I wasn't laughing anymore. After my first encounter with whatever lurked in the tunnels, I stopped questioning the rules. I still didn't understand them, but I followed them to the letter. I had seen the way Cooper and the others treated them like gospel. And after hearing that voice mimic a desperate plea for help, I knew better than to think this was some elaborate hazing ritual. The next morning, I showed up at the station early, hoping to get some answers. Martinez was already there, sipping his usual burnt coffee and flipping through a logbook. He gave me a knowing look as I hesitated in the doorway. "Couldn't sleep, huh?" I shook my head. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit. Ask what you need to ask." I hesitated before pulling out the laminated list of rules Cooper had given me. "Who made these?" I asked. Martinez leaned back, rubbing his temple. "They've been around longer than any of us. Passed down from the guys who came before. You hear stories. You see things. The rules keep you alive. I ran a finger down the list, pausing on the second one. The water. What happens if you look too long? Martinez's expression darkened. You don't want to find out. I waited for him to continue, but he didn't. Instead, he stood, stretched, and tossed his empty coffee cup in the trash. You'll learn soon enough, kid. But if you're smart, you won't push it. That night, I was on shift with a guy named Reynolds. He was newer than me, but he carried himself like he had something to prove. Overconfident. A bad trait down here. Our assignment was simple, routine patrol. Check access points, make sure no civilians had wandered where they shouldn't. Easy enough. Or so I thought. We had just reached one of the older tunnels when Reynolds stopped. Look at that, he said, pointing to a faint glow up ahead. I frowned. There shouldn't have been any lights down here. We mark it and move on, I said, remembering Rule 4. Reynolds scoffed. Come on, man. You don't wonder what's back there? Not my job to wonder, I said firmly. But he was already moving toward it. I swore under my breath and followed. If something happened to him, it would be on me. As we stepped closer, I saw the glow was coming from beneath the water, a faint, shifting light, like something bioluminescent was swimming just beneath the surface. Reynolds knelt beside the edge. Damn. You ever see anything like... Back up. My voice was sharper than I intended. He didn't listen. He leaned in. And then the water moved. Not like a ripple. Not like something swimming by. It pulled toward him like it was reaching out. The glow pulsed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a shape beneath the surface, something wrong, something that shouldn't be there. Reynolds gasped, jerking back. His face went pale. Jesus Christ. I grabbed his arm and yanked him away. Don't look. We stumbled backward, breathing hard. The water stilled, the glow fading like it had never been there at all. Reynolds stared at me, eyes wide. Did you see? I saw enough. I cut him off. We're leaving. We didn't talk the rest of the way back. When we reached the station, Cooper took one look at us and nodded. You get too close to the water? Reynolds hesitated, then nodded. Cooper sighed. Go home. Get some sleep. If you hear anything tonight, don't listen. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. I was starting to learn that the worst thing about working down in the tunnels wasn't the smell or the claustrophobia, it was the waiting. Hours of routine, of walking through damp corridors and checking maintenance hatches, waiting for something to happen. The problem was, when something did happen, you almost always wished it hadn't. The call came at 2:13 a.m. A missing person. A transient, last seen near a maintenance shaft that led directly into the tunnels. This was common. Homeless people sometimes took shelter down there, not knowing or not believing the dangers that lurked beneath the city. Cooper gave me a nod as I checked my gear. Take Martinez with you, he said. Follow protocol. And if anything feels off, you turn around. Understood? I nodded. Understood. We reached the entrance to the tunnels within 20 minutes. The man who reported the missing person, a subway worker finishing the night shift, was still there. His face was pale, and he kept shifting on his feet like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. I didn't see much, he stammered. Just a guy, maybe 40, long coat, beard. I told him he couldn't stay down there. He just looked at me, smiled, and said he was waiting for someone. Martinez frowned. Waiting for who? The worker shook his head. Didn't say. Just climbed down the maintenance hatch. And you didn't follow? I asked. The man let out a dry laugh. Hell no. I heard some of you guys talk about the tunnels. I called it in and left. I couldn't blame him. Martinez and I descended into the tunnels, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The deeper we went, the more the city above us seemed like a distant memory. The walls dripped with moisture, and the air smelled of decay. We reached the spot where the transient was last seen. The water was undisturbed, the tunnel stretching ahead in eerie silence. Then we heard it. A voice, faint but clear. "Help me." I froze, Martinez beside me. The words echoed down the corridor, bouncing off the slick walls. "Help me." I glanced at Martinez. "Did that sound off to you?" He nodded slowly. Like a recording. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The last time I heard a voice repeat itself like that, Cooper had pulled me out immediately. We should have left. We should have followed the rules. Instead, we moved forward. The voice led us deeper into the tunnels, always just ahead, always exactly the same. No change in tone. No desperation. Just the same two words, perfectly repeated, as if something was waiting for us to get close enough. Then we saw the figure. A man stood at the far end of the tunnel, half shrouded in shadows. He wasn't moving. His back was turned to us, his posture unnaturally stiff. Martinez raised his flashlight. "Sir, we're here to help. Are you injured?" The figure didn't react. Martinez took a step forward. "Sir?" The figure twitched. Not a natural movement, sharp and jerky, like a puppet whose strings had just been yanked. Then it mimicked Martinez's voice. "Sir?" Perfectly. Down to the tone, the hesitation. A chill ran down my spine. Martinez stopped in his tracks. I could see his breathing quicken, his fingers tightening around his flashlight. "Back up," I whispered. The figure twitched again. And then, it turned. The face was wrong. Too smooth. Too featureless. Like someone had blurred out all the details, leaving behind only a vague impression of a human. The mouth opened, but no sound came out. Martinez grabbed my arm. "Run." We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted back the way we came, the sound of splashing water behind us. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if it was following. We reached the ladder, scrambling up as fast as we could. Martinez was already halfway up when I heard it again. My own voice, repeating the last thing I said. I didn't stop to think. I hauled myself out of the tunnels and slammed the maintenance hatch shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. Martinez and I sat there, gasping for breath. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Then he looked at me and whispered, "That wasn't a person." I swallowed hard. "No, it wasn't." We reported what happened to Cooper. He listened, then simply nodded. "You followed it further than you should have," he said. "Next time you hear a voice repeat itself, you turn around." I didn't argue. I just nodded. Because I had a feeling next time we wouldn't get away so easily. After what Martinez and I encountered in the tunnels, I found it impossible to shake the feeling that something was watching me. Even when I was above ground, in my apartment, I couldn't stop replaying the moment the figure turned toward us. The unnatural twitch, the way it mimicked our voices so perfectly. I didn't know what we had seen, but I knew one thing for certain, it hadn't been human. 2 days later, Cooper assigned me a new partner. Martinez had put in for temporary reassignment to surface patrol, an unspoken sign that what we saw had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. I didn't blame him. My new partner was Alvarez. She was experienced, confident, and, more importantly, she didn't ask questions she didn't want answers to. Our first shift together was a standard patrol. Check the tunnels, ensure no civilians had wandered where they shouldn't. I was relieved. I wasn't ready for another encounter with whatever was down there. For the first hour, everything was quiet. Just the usual dripping of water, the distant hum of the city above us. But then, as we passed through an older section of the tunnels, Alvarez stopped short. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I turned, my grip tightening on my flashlight. "See what?" She pointed ahead. A shadow. It moved fast. I swallowed hard. An animal? She shook her head. Too big. We stood there, flashlights scanning the tunnel ahead. The air felt wrong. Heavy. And then, from somewhere in the distance, we heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. And coming straight toward us. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to hold steady. Alvarez raised a hand, signaling me to stay put. The footsteps continued, growing closer. Then they stopped. Silence. Alvarez turned to me, mouthing, "We need to go." I nodded. We moved carefully, stepping back the way we came, keeping our lights trained forward. That's when I saw it. A shape, just at the edge of our flashlight's reach. Not a person. It was too tall, its limbs too long. The head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if it was listening. My breath caught in my throat. Then it moved. Not walked, shifted. 1 second it was standing still, the next it was 10 feet closer. No sound. No motion. Just closer. Alvarez grabbed my arm. Go. Now. We turned and ran. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. I could hear Alvarez breathing heavily beside me, hear the splashes of water beneath our boots as we sprinted toward the nearest access ladder. And behind us, the footsteps started again. Faster this time. We made it to the ladder. Alvarez shoved me upward first. I climbed as fast as I could, hands slick with sweat. I didn't dare look down. She was right behind me. As soon as we hit the surface, we slammed the hatch shut. Locked it. Then we just stood there, panting, staring at each other. Finally, Alvarez spoke. That wasn't human. I shook my head. No, it wasn't. We reported everything to Cooper. He listened, nodded, and handed us 2 new laminated cards. Updated rules. There was a new one on the list. 8. If you see a shadow that moves too fast or too slow, do not follow it. It is not your shadow. And it is not alone. I didn't sleep that night. Because I knew. Whatever was down there, it had seen us too. After the last encounter, Alvarez and I were eager to return to the tunnels. But when you work search and rescue down here, you don't get the luxury of refusing a shift. We were given a simple route this time. A straight patrol along the main sewer line, no deep tunnels, no old maintenance shafts. Stay in the light. Stick to the marked paths. But as I had come to learn, the tunnels had their own plans. We started our patrol at midnight. The air was thick with dampness, the smell of rot settling into our clothes as we moved through the corridor. For a while, everything was quiet. The distant sound of running water, the occasional rustle of rats. Normal. Almost comforting in its routine. Then we heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought I had imagined it. A trick of the water moving through old pipes. But then it came again, soft, indistinct. Words I couldn't quite make out. I stopped, shining my flashlight toward the sound. Alvarez did the same. You heard that, right? She asked, voice low. I nodded. Yeah. The whispering continued, just ahead of us, echoing off the damp walls. More than one voice now. Layered over each other, hushed and urgent, like a conversation we weren't meant to hear. I felt a chill run down my spine. We should go. Alvarez hesitated. What if it's someone trapped? I shook my head. You know the rules. She exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. We turned back the way we came, moving quickly, staying in the light. The whispers followed. I don't know when we realized they were saying our names. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then I heard it, clear as day. Daniel. Alvarez. We froze. Alvarez's hand shot out, gripping my arm. That. Run. We sprinted. The tunnel twisted ahead of us, stretching farther than it should have. I knew this route. It was a straight path back to the access ladder. But now, it wasn't. It bent and curved, the walls pressing closer, the air thick with whispers. The voices weren't behind us anymore. They were all around us. My flashlight flickered. Alvarez swore, shaking hers as the beam dimmed. The walls pulsed, the concrete shifting like something breathing. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, until they became a dull roar in my ears. Then, suddenly, silence. We stumbled into an open chamber. An old service junction, long abandoned. Our light stabilized, cutting through the dark. The whispers had stopped. Alvarez turned in a slow circle, breathing hard. Where the hell are we? I checked my map. This place wasn't on it. The realization sent a fresh wave of fear through me. We need to leave. Now. Alvarez nodded, but as we turned, something moved at the edge of the light. A figure. No. Figures. Standing just beyond our reach, watching. Their faces were wrong, stretched, blurred, shifting like static on an old TV screen. Then one of them stepped forward. And it had my face. I felt my stomach drop. The thing opened its mouth, and when it spoke, it was my voice. You shouldn't be here. My legs refused to move. My breath caught in my throat. Alvarez grabbed my wrist. Close your eyes. I didn't ask why. I shut them tight. Now walk. Don't look. No matter what. I let her guide me. I kept my eyes shut as the whispers returned, louder than before. My own voice, Alvarez's voice, voices I didn't recognize, hissing and murmuring things I didn't want to understand. I kept walking, step after step, until the air shifted. The damp, heavy pressure lifted. The ground beneath my boots felt solid again. I opened my eyes. We were back at the ladder. Alvarez let out a shaky breath. Go. We climbed without hesitation, bursting onto the surface like drowning people gasping for air. We slammed the hatch shut behind us, locking it tight. Neither of us spoke on the way back to the station. Cooper was waiting for us. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed us the rule sheet, and we both immediately saw the change. Rule number 9, if you hear whispers, do not follow them. If they say your name, do not answer. And if they sound like you, run. After the whispers, after the thing that spoke in my own voice, I thought I had seen the worst of the tunnels. But I was wrong. There are places down there that don't exist on any map. Places where time doesn't move right, where the walls seem to breathe, where the rules don't work the way they should. And sometimes, people go in and never come back. That night, we almost became one of them. Alvarez and I were assigned another patrol. Routine, they said. Just a simple sweep through Sector 3B, one of the older but safer tunnels. We didn't argue. After what we had seen, the idea of safe sounded good. We started at midnight, as usual. The tunnels were quiet. Too quiet. Even the usual sounds, water dripping, rats skittering, were gone. That was the first sign something was wrong. We walked for 20 minutes, checking the usual entry points, making sure no one had broken in. Everything was normal until it wasn't. The tunnel ahead of us changed. I don't mean it turned or branched off. I mean 1 second we were in Sector 3B, and the next, the walls were different. The concrete looked older, rougher. The markings that usually told us where we were, sector codes, directional arrows, were gone. Alvarez stopped. This isn't right. I checked my map. We were heading east. The tunnel should be a straight shot. She turned slowly, shining her flashlight behind us. The way we came was gone. Instead of a tunnel leading back to the surface, there was just more darkness, stretching on forever. I felt my stomach drop. No. No, no, no. Stay calm, Alvarez said, though I could hear the tension in her voice. We stick to protocol. We mark our path, keep track of turns, and keep moving. We'll find a way out. She pulled out a can of spray paint from her pack and marked a bright red X on the wall. We kept walking. An hour passed. Then 2. The tunnel never changed. It just went on endlessly. No intersections, no maintenance doors, no signs of where we were. And worst of all, no sign of the X we left behind. "This is impossible," I whispered. Alvarez exhaled sharply. "I don't like this." We kept walking. Our flashlights started to flicker. Our radios, usually our lifeline to the surface, only produced static. Then we heard the footsteps. At first, they were distant. Slow. Measured. Like someone was following us just out of sight. We stopped. So did the footsteps. Alvarez glanced at me. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "Yeah." We moved again. The footsteps followed. Faster this time. We turned a corner, though I swear there had been no corners before, and found ourselves facing something new. A door. Old, rusted, metal. It didn't belong here. None of this did. The footsteps behind us grew louder. "We don't have a choice," Alvarez said. "Inside. Now." She grabbed the handle and yanked it open. We stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind us. We were somewhere else now. The tunnel was gone. Instead, we stood in a massive chamber, bigger than anything that should exist underground. The walls stretched high above, disappearing into blackness. And we were not alone. Figures stood in the distance, just barely visible in the dim light. Not moving. Not breathing. Watching. Alvarez grabbed my arm. "We need to leave." We turned, searching for the door. It was gone. A voice echoed through the chamber. Not a whisper. Not a mimicry. Something else. Something ancient. "You are not supposed to be here." Alvarez tightened her grip on my sleeve. "Run." We ran. The chamber seemed endless. No exits, no escape. The figures didn't move, but I could feel them watching. Then, a doorway. A maintenance hatch, small, barely visible against the dark wall. We sprinted for it. Alvarez reached it first, yanking it open, shoving me through. I turned, grabbing her arm, pulling her in behind me. The door slammed shut. Silence. We were back. The tunnels looked normal again. The markings returned. Our radios crackled back to life. I checked my watch. Only 10 minutes had passed. Neither of us spoke as we climbed the access ladder and emerged into the night air. We reported what happened to Cooper. He listened, then simply handed us an updated list of rules. A new one had been added. Rule number 10, if the tunnel keeps going but never changes, turn back immediately. If you find a door that shouldn't exist, do not open it. And if you hear footsteps that aren't yours, they already know you're there. After the night we got lost, Alvarez and I decided we needed a break from deep patrols. But the tunnels don't care what you want. They pull you back in. Cooper assigned us a new task: inspect the lower maintenance corridors beneath Sector 5. Standard check for structural issues. Simple. Except, down here, nothing is ever simple. We descended at midnight. The air was thick with moisture, the distant sound of dripping water filling the silence between our footsteps. Just in and out, Alvarez muttered, adjusting her flashlight. No distractions. I nodded, but I knew better. The tunnels had their own plans. 30 minutes in, everything seemed normal. We checked the main pipeline, marked down minor cracks in the concrete. Then, as we turned a corner, Alvarez stopped short. What the hell is that? I followed her gaze and felt my stomach drop. A mirror. It stood at the end of the tunnel, tall, old, its surface warped with age. The frame was rusted, covered in something that looked disturbingly like scratches. It didn't belong here. There was no reason for a mirror to be in the middle of an abandoned sewer tunnel. I swallowed hard. Cooper didn't mention this, did he? Nope. I turned to my radio. Command, this is Officer Daniels. We found something on in Sector 5. A mirror. Looks old. Should we remove it? Static. Alvarez tried hers. More static. We exchanged uneasy glances. We should leave, I said. Yeah. She took a step back. Our reflections didn't. I didn't realize it at first. Not until Alvarez made a strangled noise and grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. Daniel, she whispered. Look. I turned back to the mirror. Our reflections stood there, watching us. We weren't moving, but they were. My stomach twisted as my reflection slowly tilted its head, just slightly, just wrong enough for my instincts to scream at me to run. Alvarez's reflection smiled. Alvarez was not smiling. Turn off your light, she whispered. What? Just do it. Now. I hesitated, then clicked my flashlight off. She did the same. Darkness swallowed us. But the mirror still glowed faintly, like it was reflecting something that wasn't there. And then, in that dim, eerie light, I saw it. There were more of them. Shadows moved behind the glass, twisting, shifting. They weren't us. They were something else. I reached for Alvarez's hand. We leave. Now. She didn't argue. We stepped backward, keeping our eyes on the mirror. Our reflections remained, watching. Whispering. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel them. Crawling under my skin, into my thoughts. Urging me to step forward. To come closer. Alvarez pulled me back. Don't listen. Just move. We turned and ran. The tunnel stretched too long. It should have taken us 30 seconds to reach the last junction, but we ran for minutes, breath ragged, the air thick and wrong. Then, just as suddenly as it began, we stumbled back into familiar ground. The exit ladder was right ahead. We climbed without hesitation, slamming the hatch shut behind us. The whispers stopped. We reported everything to Cooper. He listened, nodded, then handed us the updated rules. A new one had been added. Rule number 11, if you find a mirror underground, do not approach it. Do not look at your reflection for too long. And if your reflection moves when you don't, run.